Hello, my name is Mordred Viking, and I'd like to welcome you to this first episode of Europa Universalis. It has been a long time coming, but at last we are coming back to this fantastic game. I do have in my hands right now the new Emperor DLC with all of the free updates and everything else that they have added, and believe me, it's a lot. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time in this first episode talking about exactly the stuff that has changed, and then we're going to switch over to the country we're actually playing as and play some. Just because there's so much to explore, I want to point out a couple of things. There's a couple of things which the nation I'm going to be playing as cannot do, but some of the mechanics around that definitely bear exploration and bear some talking about for that. The other thing I want to mention is there is going to be a big creator multiplayer game going on this evening. So that is Saturday the 6th of June, starting at 6 PM British summertime. And I would heartily recommend that you come along and join us. Watch. Because it is going to be fantastic. We have some absolutely phenomenal people taking part. We've got Quill 18, Shenrir, Midge, Ben Magnus, me, Ultra Hill, Solar Gamer, Sir Squire, Helson Strat. I know I am missing so many people right now. Lord Lambert, Father Loris. I think TJ is playing. Not actually sure about that. And Midgeman is commentating on it. So I am actually playing. And there is a small little country over here, which I am rather appreciative of, which I will be playing as myself. I am taking on the reigns of the Stadtholder of Holland, and doing my best to come out from under the thumb of Burgundy, because we do start a personal union under them. But again, that is going to be at 6 PM this evening, twitch.tv/MordredViking. All of us will be streaming it. I am sure it's going to be all over Twitch. You'll find it on our Twitter feeds, you'll find it in our Discords. And I really do urge you to come and watch it, because it is going to be an unmissable event. So, rather excited about that. Anyway, let's talk more about what Emperor itself does. So, where to begin? Well, let's begin with the title, Emperor, because this has added a bunch of mechanics to the Holy Roman Empire. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I understand all of this, because I haven't actually had a chance to play with it, but you will notice immediately that the UI has changed, and there are some new things going on. So first of all, it does show the electors over here, as well as who they're voting for, and the relations with you. So that part hasn't changed. There are bonuses for being the Emperor, which also haven't changed. Well, actually, the bonuses might have. Haven't checked that. No, they seem to be more or less the same. But the big things are going to be the reforms. The way that reforms work has changed. The way that the religious stuff works. There's still going to be the League War. Yes, I love the League War. It's one of my favourite events. But there is going to be more leading up to it, and there's also a lot more the Catholics can do. The Catholics are another faction that have had a pretty beefy overhaul. And then there's also the choice between whether to centralise or decentralise the empire. So some of the reforms, for example, call for Reichsreform, local construction, development, cost. I think that one's much the same. Institute Reichsregiment, diplomatic reputation, unrest. Then we also have the centralization versus decentralization, which only the Emperor can do. So the first step of decentralization, divide the Reichstag between two separate colleges for the Emperor, the princes and the imperial cities, to improve its functioning for all. And this will allow there to be more free cities. Versus the centralization, reduce the legislative independence by making the Emperor the final legal authority within the Empire, and then the Emperor gets cheaper core creation cost, and again, only the Emperor can do this. I'm not going to talk too much about these right now, because I kind of want to explore them more naturally as the game itself progresses. Then we've got the Imperial Diet. This is basically the Parliament, and there are incidents which will pop up. So one of the incidents, for example, is the Burgundian inheritance, which is one which is probably going to be fairly early on. Another one would be the League Wars. The Hanseatic League, I think, is another one, actually. Shadow Kingdom, that's another one. So these are all events which can pop up and which need resolving in certain ways. Must admit, don't know exactly how that's going to function yet either, but the idea there is fantastic. I haven't had much of a chance to actually dive in and play. I've spent a bit of time picking through the different aspects of the game. I've spent some time like looking at the new national focuses and just like seeing what I could find, because this is such a humongous expansion that there is a lot of stuff going on. So that is the HRE. Then I did mention that the papacy has changed, or rather the Catholic faith. So you can see here, this is the Catholic overview. That has also changed. We can see here in the top left, which is the Reformed Desire. That is the chance of Protestant and Reformed kicking off. We have a button to spend money to appoint loyalists as a cardinal. This will increase corruption, but increase invested influence to become the next papal controller, which right now is going to be the Papal States, although I think that might immediately recalculate depending on how many people have cardinals. You can also have a little bit more influence about exactly where the cardinals appear. Not sure just yet how. But that is something you can do. You actually have some more control, particularly as the Curia controller, where the cardinals are going to be. I don't know if we necessarily can do it as the Pope. So let's go and switch over to, say, Florence and take a look at what they're doing. And I'm just in observer mode, so I can actually flick around and see what exactly is going on here. So we are in Florence. That's stating stuff. Somebody in the comments is probably going to be screaming at me going, "It's over there!" Well, like I said, it's possible. I just don't know how. And that's probably going to be a recurring theme as we try and work out how on earth this is going on. Then, and this is a big change, there is the Curia coffers. So, all of the Catholic nations in the world pay a certain amount of money into the Curia, and then basically the Curia controller can spend that money to do stuff. So at the moment they are going to be earning 11.3 ducats a month from all of the other Catholic states, and the amount being paid I think is dependent on the power of the clergy within each nation. That ties into the estate mechanic, which is completely changed. That's almost unrecognizable, except for the fact that there's clergy, burghers, nobility, plus some others like the Cossacks. Then the Curia money is spent on stuff, for example, investigating heresy, which reduces the Reformed Desire for the Catholics, and I think it's also spent on stuff like the Golden Bulls. There are probably other things it's spent on. Let's see if there is a diplomat. Here we go, papal actions. Appoint Cardinal. There is, in fact, the Appoint Cardinal. So you can actually say, right, in exchange for an alliance or something, I'll appoint you a Cardinal, or I'll give myself a Cardinal, or anything like that. So, yeah, you can actually give people Cardinals if you're playing as the papacy and you want to reward somebody who's been particularly good for you, or if you're the papal controller and you want to meddle a little bit with who exactly controls what. What else in the papacy do we have? We have the Golden Bulls. These are items which will cost money from the Curia, and you can basically give bonuses to the entire faith. So rather than individual members coming into the papacy and them saying, I would like my ruler to be blessed, which will give prestige, and you basically pay out papal influence. That has not changed. That is still there. But now we have the Golden Bulls as well, which you can only do if you're the papal controller. And like I said, these give bonuses. So for example, the Apostolicae Servitutis will reduce the cost of all Curia powers by 50%. It lasts a certain amount of time, but I'm not 100% sure. And it will cost you 200 Curia treasury to do it. Then we've got Dei Gratia Rex, which gives you yearly absolutism, reduces regiment drill cost, reduces unrest in Catholic provinces, etc., etc., etc. So you have a way of like modifying exactly what the the Catholic faith is doing, and it gives a lot more reason to keep as many people Catholic as possible. Because one of the problems in pre-Emperor Catholicism is Catholicism actually got stronger the smaller it was. So the less countries that are around, the more papal influence you would generate, the more cardinals you could get, and therefore get more papal influence, which then meant that you could use those papal influence boons more frequently. But that was diluted if there were too many countries who did it. But now, the more countries you have, the more people are paying into the tithes, the more tithe the church has, the more of the papal bulls and other powers that they will be able to manipulate and use. And I'm sure that is something that will come up more in future plays. Like I said, I'm kind of touching the surface here on what exactly has changed, because I am still discovering this for myself. It is really, really big what is happening. Okay, so the next thing I want to take a quick look at, and we'll borrow, not the Dutch, we will use Brandenburg, is the estates. And this is quite possibly my favourite change. You will notice immediately that this overview has changed dramatically. There is no longer the need to allocate an estate to different territories. That aspect of the micromanagement is gone. And I am so happy about that, because that was just mindless clicking. There was a bit of min-maxing, sure, that you could like put a burger in a trade location so you could increase your trade value. Yeah, there were some things which were nice about that, but generally, like, the clergy, you'd put wherever was a cheap province, wherever the military were, you kind of put in another cheap province, or somewhere you really needed to defend. But now, it's all abstract. There is still estate land. Different estates will own a different portion of your realm, and you can basically give out land or take land back from them. There is also a fourth estate, which is very, very important. That is the crown estate. The more territory the crown itself has, the more powerful the state itself is. So, for example, the crown land here in Brandenburg, we can see they actually lack in terms of control. So I think the minimum level for no penalty is 30%. So they are just under what they need to do that. So they basically need to pinch some land from one of the other provinces, or I think like increased development or something. There are going to be ways of manipulating that. So, for example, they can now do things like selling titles, which will sell off 10% of the crown land, but give you an immediate cash injection. And you can see there exactly who will get what percentage of land depending on their influence. And this is another important area where influence matters. So, for example, unsurprisingly for Brandenburg, their nobility is very powerful. They have a 39% influence, and therefore they will get 5.7% of the 10% land which is sold. Whereas the clergy in Brandenburg, not very strong. They only get 1.4%. The more land that they get, the happier they become, the more influential they are, the bigger their bonuses are. So in some instances, you may actually want to build up, for example, the nobility if you want those nobility bonuses, and those are much the same as they used to be. So the nobility at 39% influence generate manpower recovery plus 10%, the clergy at 15% influence, 5% national taxes, and then the burghers at 25% give a 10% trade efficiency. I believe there are different levels of influence which will increase the number of bonuses you get, but I don't know how to check that, and I haven't seen any like official overview of exactly how those function. The other thing, and this is where you can really start to get into the nuts and bolts of your estates, are privileges. And privileges are really cool because they are another way of customizing how your nation works. So, for example, we can go to the clergy and add a privilege to the clergy. And we have here a whole list of different privileges. So we have the clergy land rights, we have the papal emissary, religious state, the clerical advisory council, the clerical ministers, oversight by the clergy, expansion of the zealotry, and then monopoly on wool. Each of these will have a different modifier and a different immediate effect. So the modifiers are ongoing aspects to having that privilege in place, and then the effect is something that happens straight away when you do it. So, for example, bringing in a papal emissary will immediately cost you 5 papal influence. However, when it is in place, it is a permanent bonus, which will stay there until it's removed, which again costs you. And it will generate +1 yearly papal influence, but it will also mean that Curia powers become 5% more expensive. Whether this Curia powers... Oh, no, that's the... No, that's Curia powers. These aren't Curia powers, these are papal powers. Huh, I wonder if that makes the powers for everyone who is a Catholic or everyone who's the Curia controller more expensive. That's interesting, because that's a way of basically weakening them. Have to find that one out. You will also notice that there are various modifiers up here. So, for example, clergy land rights can look pretty good. Governing capacity is now the new limit to how much territory you can own. I think it's on a 1-to-1 basis, so 100 governing capacity is 100 development worth of expansion. Don't know about that for sure, have not investigated it, but that's how I imagine it works. However, giving up clergy land rights and getting that 100 governing capacity will require you to give up 5% of your crown lands. So yes, you can make your realm bigger, but it will also become more inefficient if you do so. So you might have more land, but you have a far less centralized state. So then you would start suffering the crown land penalties, which are again on a sliding scale. And if you have a very powerful, very centralized crown land estate, then you'll actually get bonuses, but I haven't actually seen what those are, so I can't really comment. So loads of different ways of tweaking. One of my favorites, the religious state. It does cost you a huge amount of crown territory given to the state, but it does increase the amount of admin power you get, so that's another way of generating power. Admin advisor cost, another one. This is actually one in my test game I immediately activated because I absolutely love the advisor cost reductions, and I will pick them up wherever I can. So, and this another thing is it doesn't cost crown land, which is really quite nice too. It will grant you or cost you clergy loyalty, so having the religious state will actually cost you clergy loyalty, whereas having the clerical advisory council will gain you loyalty. It will increase their influence by 10%, whereas the religious state doesn't change influence at all. Crown territory, and then absolutism. So more of these privileges that you have in place, the less centralized your power is, the less absolutism you will be able to have. And there are privileges for every single estate. So that was the clergy. We have here the nobility. So this is nobility land rights, primacy of the nobility, nobility officer corps, increased levies, aristocratic councillors, right of council, supremacy over the crown, monopoly on mining and smelting, monopoly on livestock. All different ways of manipulating your realm and tweaking it and customizing it to how you want things to run. And then finally the burghers, burgher land rights, land of commerce, burghers in the admiralty, patronage of the arts, commercial advisory board, indebted to the burghers, free enterprise, control over monetary policy, monopoly on textiles, and this is up on YouTube, so just pause if you want to read more about what these are doing. I'm trying to blitz through this kind of quickly so I can cover everything. Alright, so that is the estates, and oh man, I'm so happy about that change. It is a really good one, and I'm looking forward to manipulating that a little bit more in the future. Alright, so the next one is going to be Mercenaries. The way the Mercenaries has also changed. In the past, it used to be that Mercenaries were effectively converting money into manpower. They were a near infinite source of generating manpower. If you had the money, you could bring in the Mercenaries, your armies would live forever. With some restrictions, of course, but that was the general idea behind them. And then you keep on getting Mercenaries until your money runs out. However, that has changed, so mercenaries now come in companies, much like in Crusader Kings. So here in Brandenburg we have the Free Company, which is like your bug standard cheap one. These guys will cost you 18 ducats to raise and will cost you 0.4 ducats a month to maintain. When you raise the Free Company, you will immediately get 4 units of infantry. So the Free Company is these 4 units of infantry. However, they have these penalties. So those 4 units will reinforce 25% slower and recover morale 10% slower as well. These are mercenaries that don't particularly want to fight, but they will of course take your money. Every mercenary company has a mercenary manpower pool. So mercenaries are no longer infinite. They will run out. Manpower does recover over time, albeit slowly. I think it recovers if they're hired, but it recovers much quicker if they've not been hired. One thing to point out is mercenaries are on a per nation basis. So if I hire the Free Company, Lübeck can also have a Free Company. It's not like I've got the Free Company, haha, you don't get it. Even for the more unique guys like the Flemish Company or the Free Swiss Guard or something like that. Like everyone can have a company of the Free Swiss Guard. That's just to stop particularly wealthy players blocking anyone else from getting mercenaries, which is a good change. No, it's not a change, it's a good thing. Then there are different mercenary companies which behave in different ways. So, for example, the Free Swiss Guard, you'll notice here, has a 5% bonus to discipline. So the 4 units of infantry that you raise as the Free Swiss Guard will get you 5% discipline. The Frisian Free Company, actually surprisingly powerful. Again, 4 units of infantry, decent amount of manpower. You will get +5 morale and 5% reduced morale taken by reserves. So if you're fighting in very big armies and the Frisians are there, their reserve units will take less morale penalty, but you do pay increasing amounts for it. So the Free Company having negative effects will cost you less. The Free Swiss Guard, particularly elite, particularly strong, same number of troops, costs you almost 5 times more, and also the wages are almost 5 times more. And then the different companies will have different prices as well. So the Free Swiss Guard being particularly expensive in that way. Different mercenary companies will also come with a general. So the Free Company doesn't come with one, so you will need to provide them with one. But the Free Swiss Guard come with a 233, Frisians a 222. Some of these generals can be really, really strong. So the Schweizer Guard, for example, the Black Guard, Rudolf von Scheidingen is a 4212, so he's quite a good commander, particularly from the mid-game onwards when fire really starts to take off. And of course these units will grow over time. I don't know if it's related to like how often they get hired, if that like adds more money to their pool. No idea how it grows. Some of it I am sure is related to your national mercenary ideas. There are some ideas which will make them cheaper. There are some ideas which will make them more numerous. There are some ideas which will mean that they recruit faster. There are some ideas which means that all mercenaries you recruit are stronger. There are lots of different ways. Like Burgundy in particular was one nation which historically was particularly good with mercenaries, and I doubt that has changed. So here we go. This gives you a mercenary maintenance -15%, so they are cheaper. Promote the Estates General, mercenary manpower +50%, so the Burgundian mercenaries will stick around longer because there's simply more of them. And there are lots of different ways of tweaking this. This is going to mean that admin ideas are now far more powerful than they used to be. I always really did not rate admin, ever. I don't think I ever took it. But now that mercenaries are a limited pool, and if you want to focus on mercenaries, or if you are a very big economic power, for example, you may well want admin, so you can get even more out of the mercenaries that you can actually hire. So yeah, that is a big change for them. What else is there to say? Government reforms. There are a bunch of government reforms in the game now as well. Many of them being unique. Oh, and I should mention the estate privileges can also be unique to different nations. So for example, France, and you will notice from the map that France has now been subdivided into a number of smaller vassals. So this is kind of a return to the original France from EU4, where it was a vassal swarm nation. They slowly but surely over time and iterations made it more centralized, but they've kind of fragmented it again. And in order to maintain as many vassals as it has a unique estate which it starts with. The French strong duchies. So this will mean that the nobility loyalty equilibrium, which is like the base point that it will trend towards, is 10% higher. So if the base point is usually 50, it will then trend towards 60. Nobility influence is increased, absolutism is decreased, but you get +3 diplomatic relations. Only France gets this. And I'm sure that there are other examples throughout the game as well. And this is another thing, kind of like the government reforms, which will allow Paradox going forwards to specialize countries in different ways and give them those little features and these little tweaks, which only they can get, or only a certain group or a certain region or a certain culture gets access to. So that is something I'm really excited about. And this is kind of taking the idea behind the government reforms and then just running with it. So, government reforms. Do we have any new ones? Well, yes, we do. The Italian city-states, that's the name, have a couple of new reforms. They actually start as an Italian signoria, which is barely indistinguishable from a monarchy. They can basically, they're like noble republics used to be. In fact, we still have the noble elite, but they're better versions of that. So you lose some absolutism, but you gain extra taxes, and you can have royal marriages. It is a plutocratic idea group, so instead of being locked into aristocratic with a noble elite, the Italian signoria is a plutocratic, and you can re-elect people from the same ruling family without penalty. Term duration 12. Wow, that's a long term duration. Impressive. So they have that unique one, and then the one that's really changed are the monastics, the theocratic nations. For example, my beloved knights. So they start out as a monastic order, which gives them 20% forward maintenance. They also have a clerical state, which is national tax plus 5%. I'm not going to talk about all of these. I know that there are dev diaries which cover this in a lot more detail, but I just wanted to highlight them. And for the knights in particular, there is this one, Mission on the High Seas. National Sailor modifier plus 20%, Naval Force limit plus 25%, chance to capture enemy ships plus 33%. The knights are really good now. And they've redone the whole lot. So one of the problems that theocracies used to have is they had less tiers of upgrades, and the upgrades just weren't as interesting as, say, the monarchies. And one of the reasons that monarchies were so strong is because they had the 7 tiers, so you could basically smack in more reforms. Well, everyone now has, I think, 8. I think they're all on 8. I'm going to try and find a monarchy real quick to see if they have 8 as well. No, in fact, the theocracies have 8, the monarchies have 7. So theocracies are very slightly more powerful. Another change with this is changing a reform no longer costs you corruption, it costs you reform power. So I think it costs you like 50% of a reform to the next level to change one of these. No corruption cost anymore. So you can be a little bit more open to adjusting your nation over time going forwards, though it will slow, of course, your progress in getting new ones in the future. So that is very cool. What else do we have? We have a couple of new German states. I was kind of looking around, trying to pick them out. Bavaria, notably, has broken down quite significantly. Munich, Landshut, Ingolstadt. Salzburg was always there. Passau is new. Augsburg always was. So there's a couple of new things going on over here. There is something in Bohemia that we need to talk about. Then we've got Berg, which is split between these three, including Ravensburg. And I could have sworn Ravensburg used to be down here, but I have a feeling that they got the names wrong. So Ravensburg is up here. And then the thing which used to be Ravensburg, which I saw earlier, I think was Rotherburg? Yeah, I think they got these two mixed up or something. I'm not sure. But that has changed. Then, right, Bohemia. If we switch over to Bohemia, we will notice that there is a blob of a different colour. They now have the Hussite faith. This is a new Christian faith, which appears before the Reformation. So this was really the beginning of the Reformation, was the Hussites in Bohemia, and it can spread to other nations via the same mechanics as the Reformation. It's just in place earlier and does not, I think, participate in the same, like, Catholic reform desire. So Bohemia starts with Hussite. Hussite is... what's its bonuses? Hang on. I know how to do this. Done this before. Tolerance of the true faith +1, tolerance of heretics -1. It does give you access. Nope, that's Catholics. What does Hussite do? Oh, I think it's because they haven't actually embraced it yet. That's what it is. So Bohemia hasn't actually embraced Hussite faith yet, and I think we're going to have to wait and see exactly what Hussite does, because I have no way of doing that in the next 3 minutes before I need this video to end. What else has changed? Thinking very, very quickly. Trade companies. Trade companies have changed. So merchant republics used to be limited in how big they could grow. They were limited to a certain number of provinces. That limit is gone. So one of the penalties that merchant republics have now is a very low governing power, whatever that was called. The thing which the Brandenburg estate nobility... governing capacity. So merchant republics have a lower governing capacity, but they can still go over it. However, the whole of Europe is now divided into trade companies. In fact, the entire world is. And trade companies can be established by anyone. It's just that merchant republics can build them cheaper. And these are kind of sitting between a territory and a full cored state. So a territory will give you a certain percentage of various resources. Trade companies won't give you as many, but they will give you other bonuses. So, for example, trade value. It's the same way as it worked in Africa and India. The other thing with trade companies is you can build special buildings. And the best way of seeing those is the new UI overview, which is here. So you can build the trade company investments in in the rest of the world, not just India and Africa, which is going to allow merchant republics to be a lot more active in the home territory. So merchant republics used to go like 2 or 3 provinces at home and then spread out and try to get a couple of little enclaves to allow them to base light ships and stuff like that so they can control the trade. Now they're going to be able to access more territory. It's not going to be as productive for them in terms of manpower or taxation, but it is going to allow them to house these trade company investments and generate more trade wealth that way. So that is another big change. I haven't exactly seen how that will affect things in the rest of the world, so that is definitely something that I'm curious to do. Now, it was my intention to start playing a game this episode, but this is obviously just going to have to be an introduction to to the next game. So you'll need to wait and see for the next episode to find out precisely what I am going to be playing as in this playthrough. So I would highly urge you, remember to check out the twitch.tv/MordredViking for the big multiplayer game of Europa Universalis, which is going to be occurring this evening. Saturday, 6th of June, starting at 6 PM GMT. Sorry, BST, British Summertime. And I am going to be in that playing as Holland. We do have something like 30 other creators all taking part. There will be details of that on my Discord, which you can find linked in the description below. And then also on the Twitch page, twitch.tv/MordredViking, for all of that. And like I said, it's going to be an amazing game. If you have enjoyed this video and you have any questions for me, then please do ask me in the comments. I do try and check those as often as I can. I don't always respond anymore. I just don't have time. I get too many of them. But I do read everything. So if you want to ask me something, if you just want to state something, if you like something, if you dislike something, stick it in the comments. I will read it, I promise. Then, if you're really enjoying this and you want to support the channel and everything I do here, check out the Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/MordredViking. And I have a Discord, which is where the community hangs out. That is where we talk about games, and you are more than welcome to join us. It is always a real pleasure to see some new faces, so please come along, say hello. And you can find all of the links to that in the description below. Right, deep breath, and I'm going to start recording the next episode. See you then. Bye, everyone.